Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving straight into how to build and audit a highly secure AI fortress using the ISO/IEC 42001-2023 standard. Look, artificial intelligence is absolutely reshaping how organizations operate from the ground up, but with that massive power comes a huge amount of risk. So the big question is, how do we actually govern it?
Think about it. It is the ultimate modern challenge. How exactly do you audit something as invisible, complex, and constantly evolving as an AI algorithm? Unlike traditional software that just runs on strict pre-programmed rules, AI learns, it adapts, and changes its behavior based on new data. Securing and auditing a system like that requires a totally new kind of framework. So here's the blueprint for our explainer today. We'll start with the Annex SL framework. Move into our foundation with scope and context, build the structure through leadership and planning, execute via support and operation, review with evaluation and improvement, and finally, we'll cover auditing the AI framework.
All right, let's jump right into part one, the Annex SL framework.
Now, Annex SL isn't just an AI thing. It's actually the universal skeleton that makes integrating multiple ISO standards totally seamless. Say your organization already runs an information security management system, like ISO 27001. Well, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Annex SL gives you a standardized 10-clause structure, running from scope and context right through to improvement. This means your new AI management system, or AIMS, can just plug directly into your existing corporate governance. And this is where the magic happens. The whole Annex SL structure relies on what we call a domino effect. These clauses are absolutely not silos, they are a tightly interlocking matrix. A shift in your organization's context directly dictates your leadership and planning. Clause 4 feeds into 5 and 6, which then sets the baseline for operations in Clause 8. Any auditor is going to look closely at this exact interrelationship to make sure the entire framework is functioning as one living, breathing entity. Moving on to Part 2, Foundation, Scope and Context.
Look, you literally cannot build a functioning AI management system until you deeply understand the unique boundaries your organization is operating in. An AI system deployed by a national defense agency, that has a wildly different context than an AI used by a retail store to recommend a pair of shoes. Clause 4 demands that you pinpoint all of those external legal pressures and internal cultural factors before you draft a single line of policy.
Put on your auditor hat for a second. We're checking to see if you've actually mapped out stakeholder expectations. Take a smart city AI, for example. It has to balance public safety utility with some pretty severe civil privacy concerns. If privacy advocacy groups are worried about mass surveillance, an auditor wants to see documented proof that you took those exact external concerns into account when you define the scope of your system.
Let's hit Part 3, Structure, Leadership and Planning.
Clause 5 is all about the top of the food chain. Because without executive management actively allocating resources and forming governance boards, the entire structure is going to collapse under its own weight. Leadership can't just sign a policy document once a year and walk away. The standard demands real executive commitment to ensure your AI strategy aligns with actual business goals and that you have hard budgets set aside for things like an AI ethics committee.
I love looking at clauses 6 and 8 side by side because you really see the workflow here. Clause 6 is essentially the architect drafting the risk treatment plan, while Clause 8 is the construction crew doing the heavy lifting out in the real world. In Clause 6, you're establishing the baseline, identifying risks like algorithmic bias or data poisoning, and setting highly measurable objectives to mitigate them.
Which brings us to Part 4, Execution, Support, and Operation.
To keep this whole operation from falling apart, Clause 7 steps in. It dictates that you must have the right human expertise, continuous training, and absolutely rigorous documentation of every single process. Sure, you need developers who understand machine learning, but you also need legal and compliance officers in the mix. And documentation? It's everything. An auditor relies heavily on document control to prove your AI models are traceable and your teams actually know what they're doing.
And when that auditor comes knocking for Clause 8, they want to see your plans actually breathing in the real world. Are you actively encrypting data? Are you checking for bias in your healthcare diagnostic algorithm every single day? If Clause 6 said you'd use explainable AI to ensure transparent decision-making, well, Clause 8 is where the auditor checks if your developers actually built that explainability into the live model.
All right, Part 5, Review, Evaluation, and Improvement.
You absolutely cannot just set and forget an AI. We all know models drift.
So Clause 9 demands continuous, real-time monitoring and really strict internal audits to catch that performance drift before it turns into a total disaster. As real-world data changes, models degrade. Clause 9 requires you to have the dashboards, the KPIs, and a rigid schedule of internal audits to evaluate if your risk controls are still holding up.
But hey, things happen, right? If an incident does occur, Clause 10 is your safety net for fixing the root cause and upgrading the system so that the exact same breach never happens twice. Let's say an AI recommendation engine accidentally pushes harmful content. Clause 10 forces you to document the incident, perform a deep root cause analysis, retrain the model, and lock in corrective actions. It's all about continuous, documented evolution. Finally, Part 6, Auditing the AI Framework. The audit trail itself is this very strict chronological journey. You prepare through massive document review, conduct the on-site investigation, report the hard truths about any gaps, and then return later to verify the fixes. The lead auditor is evaluating everything from the boardroom's high-level strategic plans all the way down to a data scientist's algorithm tests. They're basically verifying that the gap between your written policies and your everyday practices is 0.
10. That's the magic number, the total number of interlocking clauses in Annex SL that absolutely must function in perfect harmony to pass an ISO/ISO 42001-2023 audit. You just aren't going to pass if you have perfect operational tech but zero leadership commitment, or great leadership but zero continuous monitoring.
And this circles us right back to that domino effect we talked about earlier. A crack in your foundation at Clause 4 will inevitably cascade and shatter your operational execution at Clause 8. If you completely miss a new privacy law during your context gathering, your leadership won't budget for compliance, your developers won't build the necessary privacy safeguards, and eventually that audit will uncover a massive operational failure. It is all connected.
The source material hits the nail on the head here. AI governance is not a static process. Building this framework is literally just day one. AI is highly dynamic, so your governance has to be a continuous, living loop. The environment changes, the technology evolves at breakneck speed, and the risks adapt. Your artificial intelligence management system has to be built to learn and adapt right alongside it. So, I'm going to leave you with this somewhat provocative thought to take away. If your algorithm completely fails tomorrow, is your fortress strong enough to pinpoint the accountability and survive the resulting audit? Implementing ISO/IEC 42001 isn't just a box-checking exercise for regulatory compliance, it's about making sure your organization can confidently innovate without losing the public's trust. Thank you for joining me for this explainer. Now go out there and review those frameworks.